Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants for our webinar today. Today is our webinar on UN Goal 11, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities. This is the final webinar in a series of webinars we are doing based on a documentary series we've put together about the UN SDGs and faith-based organizations and actors and how they support sustainable development. My name is Caleb. I am with KAICIID. I do in communications, I do multimedia and photography, and I, along with two colleagues, Christine and Anya, help put together this project for all of you. So this webinar today will be recorded and later published on the KAICIID website and our YouTube channel. So if you've missed it, parts of it, or you want to share it with anyone, you can find it probably by the end of next week or so. Additionally, there is an evaluation that will be passed around through the chat function, and it would really help us if you could go ahead and fill that out. It should take less than a minute or so, and it will help us essentially come up with better content, more interesting content, and hear how you feel and what you think about what you've seen today, and maybe in other KAICIID things as well. So, and everyone who is attending, could you please introduce yourselves through the chat function, because we'd really like to know who is here, where you're from, and maybe how you are working to contribute to the SDGs, especially if you're a faith-based organization or a faith actor. So firstly, I will then introduce our panelists. We have three panelists today who we have invited from, it looks like the Americas, essentially. So our first panelist is Luis Armenta, and he is the Chief Operating Officer at Habitat for Humanity Mexico, who we also worked with in putting together the film that we're going to show you later today. Luis is from Mexico City. He has 25 years of experience in working for international FBOs and has worked with Habitat Humanity for the past 7 years and currently leads the operational areas of the organization. Our second panelist, Mike Abate, who is based in Portland, Oregon. He is an award-winning landscape architect and urban planner with more than 30 years of professional experience. He's been a recognized leader in the field of parks and recreation for a long time. And in 2011, under his leadership, Portland Parks and Recreation received the gold medal from the National Recreation and Parks Association for the best managed large municipal park system in the US. Mike has also just recently published a book called Gardening Eden on the intersection of environmental stewardship and spiritual faith. And finally, Tiago Masrur, who served formerly as the senior project manager from the Baha'i House of Worship in Santiago, Chile, until its completion in 2016. The project was awarded the 2017 Innovation in Architecture Award presented by the Royal Architecture Institute of Canada. Tiago has also focused on interreligious efforts since his appointment to the Interreligious Council of the Chilean government between 2015 and 2018. And additionally, he helped found the Interreligious Dialogue Association for the Human Development of Chile. And we've also got images to be shown later of the House of Worship, which are really incredible. So without further ado, we are very happy to show, before the panel discussion, our film on the UN Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, which we filmed with Habitat for Humanity in Chiapas, Mexico.
Fue muy feo, una experiencia horrible. Yo lo sentí al principio y empecé a hablar a mis hermanitos que vamos para afuera. Era algo horrible, todos estábamos llorando porque al ver que no paraba, ver nuestra casa que se estaba cayendo.
La noche del sismo en Chiapas afectó a más de 300,000 familias. 40,000 de ellas fueron daños parciales, 17,000 de ellas daño total. A lo largo de estos 2 años se ha logrado trabajar un 50% de viviendas.
El día de esa noche del terremoto, mis nietos ya estaban acostados. Todos estaban Era la división de una pieza grande. Todos estaban en una camita, otra camita, otra camita. Y yo pues allá afuera, en la hamaca. Cuando fue el terremoto, estas horas se empezó a mover y ya empecé a hablarles que nos fuéramos para el patio.
Después del sismo del 7 de septiembre de 2017, Hábitat para la Humanidad México salió a diferentes estados, entre ellos Chiapas, que fue uno de los más afectados. Hábitat para la Humanidad México es una organización que trabaja con principios cristianos. Nosotros trabajamos a través de tres principios, que son el servicio, el respeto y el amor en acción. Y lo que hacemos es trabajar principalmente por medio de dos ejes. El primero es un eje social, en el cual procuramos la organización comunitaria para poder lograr la cohesión social. Y el otro es el eje técnico, en el cual a través de arquitectos calificados logramos que las familias logren y tengan una vivienda adecuada.
Pues el cambio ha sido radical. Se ve desde afuera, porque nuestra casa ni siquiera estaba repellada. Era, como les comenté, era de ladrillos. Ahora cada uno podemos tener nuestro cuarto. Antes lo único que nos dividía eran unas cortinas.
El principio básico de una vivienda para el camino hacia la sustentabilidad es la adaptación del entorno, el jugar y poder utilizar todos los elementos, agua, luz y aire, nos ayuda a poder localizarla y plasmarla en un lugar y adaptarse a todo el contexto.
El proceso técnico que tenemos en Hábitat para la Humanidad México consiste en hacer copartícipe a las familias en todo el transcurso de la construcción o reconstrucción de su casa. Nosotros procuramos que estas familias participen desde el diseño hasta en el proceso de la construcción, no solo de su casa, sino de la casa de sus vecinos, lo cual ayuda a generar nuevamente las redes. En Hábitat para la Humanidad México basamos nuestro trabajo para crear viviendas adecuadas, lo que significa que cada vivienda tiene que contar con ventilación e iluminación natural y una solución de agua y saneamiento, y no se debe encontrar en una zona de riesgo.
Realizar el uso de las ecotecnologías y democratizar el conocimiento acerca de la sustentabilidad nos ayudaría a elevar las mejores calidades de viviendas en el estado de Chiapas.
Porque una de las cosas que hay detrás de cada eventualidad de ese tipo es una ayuda desmedida de mucha gente de todas partes del mundo que vienen y dicen vamos a ayudar. Hubieron comunidades que básicamente sí fueron muy afectadas y que vinieron a ayuda de todos lados. Creo que esa es una muestra grande de poder ver que nuestra humanidad tiene un futuro, partiendo desde este sentido de no ser egoístas, sino capaces de compartir.
Thanks for watching, everybody. I think that's my personal favorite out of the film series. I think I said that about all of them, but I really like this one. I'm a big architecture fan, so that's probably why. Moving on. So in 2008, the number of people living in urban areas outpaced the number of people living in rural areas for the first time in history. By 2050, 2/3 of the global population will live in cities, And this rapid urbanization has led to things like overcrowding, slums, and informal settlements, which are already home to more than 1 billion people worldwide. It strains cities' services and infrastructure. And these people, they work in the informal sector, lack adequate housing, running water, sanitation, waste management, as well as healthcare services and public transport. And often these conditions make them particularly vulnerable to preventable disease and especially to COVID-19. Many religious institutions, faith-based organizations like Habitat for Humanity understand that adequate shelter is a basic human need and a prerequisite for enjoying other rights. They've long provided safe housing solutions for vulnerable communities and led disaster relief efforts around the world. Overcoming overcrowding and congestion is very difficult, and it causes several other serious issues, things like air pollution, which cause more than 4 million premature deaths each year, and was recently published, nearly 400,000 of which are infants in their first month of life. So open public spaces such as parks and beaches, which are vital for physical health, mental health, good breathing air, and things like that, really represent only a small fraction of most cities' allocated area. And these spaces, when they exist, are sometimes difficult to reach by foot and are generally not accessible to many minority and marginalized communities. So these are just a few of the issues that we hope to touch on today in our discussion. And I'd now like to turn over to our panelists, the first of which is Luis. And some of these questions we have drafted ourselves. Some of them have come from participants. And hopefully from that, we can get at least some interesting presentations and maybe some dialogue going too. So first, we'll start with Luis, who is from Habitat for Humanity, excuse me. Habitat for Humanity operates in 70 countries around the world, and particularly in places where there is a chronic lack of decent housing. So Luis, from your experience and with your work in Mexico, what are some of the gaps you've seen in ensuring adequate housing, and maybe how can faith communities fulfill those gaps?
Yeah, thank you. I would say basically there are three basic gaps that need to be addressed. The first one obviously is access to land, but to a land which is safe, adequate, affordable, and in areas which require that have the services that families require. Sometimes, especially for the low-income families, the land that is available do not have services, and I mean water, sanitation, transportation, even schools. So I think that the basic thing is access to land, and sometimes it's very difficult. The second one, I would say, it's financial support to build a house, or to maintain the house, or to improve the house. Especially people, low-income families, which are the people that Habitat works with, do not have access to loans, do not have access to different funding mechanisms. Most of these populations work in informal sectors, so they are not part of the banking systems. They are not. The banks wouldn't give them a loan. So financing is a key piece. In some governments, we have subsidy, but subsidy maybe has to come with funding and other financial sources. So the second one would be financial support. And the third one, which we have found is a key piece, is technical assistance. In countries such as Mexico, and I think it's common in many places around the world, low-income families build their houses by their own, without experience, without technical expertise around, and so they do that gradually. In some of our studies, we have seen that it takes up to 20 years for a family to finish their house without technical assistance and without financial support. That makes the construction less resistant, less secure. They spend more money because they take more time. And when we work with families and we may have access to financial assistance and technical assistance, that 20-year period can reduce to 4 to 8 months, which is more effective. And maybe just in this concept of progressive housing, where they can have the basic house and then continue adding. And many of I want to point this, the importance of this technical assistance. Maybe what we found in this earthquake, especially, but I think it's common in these kinds of events, is that the houses that collapse didn't have the required structure, the blend of the materials, the concrete is not the right mixture. Those that may sound easy pieces, but that when the family does that by themselves and without any expertise around, puts the family at risk at the medium place. No, I will point on these 3 ones, and we in Habitat try to provide the technical assistance and also bring a different mix of resources so the families can have financial support to build the house of their dreams.
Okay, interesting. And so, and you said Habitat, you approach strictly from the technical side, or also from, like you said, with financing and access to land?
In Mexico, especially, we do not work access to land. We do some we provide assistance so they can know how to do the all the procedures that need to be done to have the tenure, the security of the land, but we do not work like providing land. We basically in Mexico work providing financial support, small funding, and also the donations that we can have, and providing technical assistance, which comes with also other social supports as we saw in the video.
Okay, and so when you're providing technical support, is there also a sustainability element, whether it's environmental sustainability or with communal support or through your organization? Or what is your model there, actually?
Yeah, in terms of sustainability, I will point maybe 3 points. Social sustainability. In our model, it requires participation and involvement of families. The families are involved in the process from we ask them, how is the dream of your house? So they have to visualize what they want. We do not, usually we do not have like prototypes, but each family builds and designs their house. The technical assistance will help them to make that adequate. I mean, that's ventilation, illumination, air, the air can pass by, but the family is involved in the design and because they have to consider the structure, the size, the needs. If there are special needs in the family, that's something that the family has to think about. So the involvement of the family in the whole cycle, and also in the building itself, we help them to supervise or to do the basic building. We work in many cases in self-construction process, so we work with them. But the participation of the family is key during the whole process. And then we also work this model of group building and helping each other. We call that in Spanish mutual help, ayuda mutua. When we build one house and the next weekend all the families of the group work in the next one, and that's not only reduces the cost and speeds up the construction because we have more hands there, but also helps to create networks, which is another element of sustainability. I've talked to people in different places, especially when they move in a new neighborhood and they start building the house, they say, Participating in the workshops of Habitat and in this system of mutual construction has helped me to better adjust and be part of the community. Now I know who my neighbors are, I can relate to them, and that builds network that lasts much more than the presence of Habitat in the community. The other one that I will point out is a cultural approach, where as we listen in the video, we try to take the resources and the practices of the community. How are they used to live their spaces? For example, in certain places of Chiapas, the families build around a large terrain. As children grow up and have their own families, they start building in the father's land, the parents' land, but they have a common kitchen at the center. And that's a cultural practice that keeps families together. Each one has the space, but the kitchen is common. So we are very respectful of those cultural practices that bring sustainability in terms of social and cultural elements, and also in terms of the resources. What are the local resources? And with the technical assistance, how we can take better advantage of those resources. And finally, an important element of our model is the educational model. We work with the families in family finance, how they can make savings, how they can make a better use of the resources. They also participate in trainings on how to do community work, how to form committees that foster the community participation. And that also even some issues of resilience, gender, problem solving. So it's not only the house, but how to leave the house and how to live with the neighbors. And that provides other level of sustainability. In architectural terms, we always have our architects or specialized support that give this expertise accompaniment in the process, but very respectful with the families. And it's a whole specialty, because maybe architects are used to come from outside and see the terrain has this size, the family is this, they have these resources, this is your house. We work in another way. They have to walk through the family and they have to listen to the family more than to their own expertise, and then combine the need, the resources, the need, and the technical expertise that they have. And I think that's one of the key elements of Habitat success with the families. And families always are very happy with the homes that they end up with, because it's the house they participated, they own it in the whole sense of ownership, and they live it in their ways. And as I said, we talk with this progressive of the house. Maybe it's not the house that we build at the beginning is not the final, but it's good enough, adequate, and for what the family needs at the moment. I think those are the key elements of the way that we work with the families.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's very, very interesting, and it's especially very cool to hear about localization, and not just with the materials, but also in spending time with the families from the architectural perspective. And personally, I find it very interesting when we take something quite external, which is a design of some kind, and you try to implement it in a new place where, well, maybe the context is different, or like you said, with the communal kitchen of the family, super interesting, and it's something that I would think be very important from the architectural standpoint. And that actually kind of segues nicely into our next question, which I wanted to ask Tiago about the sustainability in the architecture of your Baha'i house of worship. It was designed to reflect the natural beauty of the landscape around it. And I found that very interesting, that not only is it supposed to kind of fold in with the nature around it, but also not to align too much with any specific religious tradition, while also incorporating certain elements like the 9 doors or 9 windows. And I think that sounds like an incredible architectural challenge. And as you'll see, I think Tiago will show the photos. It's a beautiful, it's a masterpiece of architecture. And then Tiago, maybe you could talk a little bit about, you know, the sustainability, where the process went in looking at the materials and looking at the usage and finding a place within the community.
Okay, so that's a lot of questions all at once. Excellent. So yeah, I'll start with sharing some images because I think they really help transmit the vision behind the building. If you can see it here, the building sits on the Precordillera of the Andes. So it's the lower parts of the Andes, and it connects directly to the city of Santiago here in Chile. And maybe one of the first aspects that could be discussed is the location of the house of worship. It took us a few years to find the right spot. We went through different stages in where we wanted to locate it in relation to the city. The requirement was that there would be some connection to Santiago, but the architect was very keen on making sure that nature was an important element of it. And as he visited the city, the architect is originally from Canada, and as he visited the city and we walked on different options, he was always attracted by the Andes and the idea that this building would be a feature within the mountain range. So we finally found this spot, which combines very well the natural environment and the urban aspect of it. So it's very well connected. It's easy to arrive. Public transportation comes close by, so people can get there. And as you mentioned, the whole, not just the aesthetics, but the materials were selected to really reflect something that is as natural as possible. It's simple in its lines, but at the same time, it has a certain complexity in its design and in the technology behind it. The building itself has 9 doors or 9 sides, as you mentioned, representing somehow the maturity humankind is arriving, 9 being the greatest digit. And so it shows a state of development of humanity. And it's a place open to everyone. So anyone can enter, anyone can be here and share this space. It's a big hall, basically, where people gather in silence to pray, to meditate, to reflect. And it's an open invitation to everyone and anyone to just come here. So it's a welcoming place. And that is part of the sustainability. And I would connect to what Luis was just mentioning. It's not just sustainable in terms of materials and constructions and heat preservation, low lighting, and really making sure that all those technical elements come together as properly as possible. But it's also a social or community side of sustainability. So it's a place where volunteers from any background will come here and help with gardening, with maintenance, with guiding and things like that. We will have activities for different age groups. So we'll have activities for children, for junior youth, for youth and adults in different spaces, both inside, around, and in the gardens. So it's really thought as a space that welcomes everyone to just come here and connect something physical, something tangible, to the immaterial, to the transcendent. It's really a space that tries to answer in one way the question, what do we aspire to in terms of individuals, in terms of societies, and in terms of spirituality? And he tries to nurture those senses. I don't remember if you had any other specific question you wanted to explore. There are more images that go more into the technical aspects and somewhat the gardens, but maybe we can show that later if you want.
Yeah, and I guess maybe we wanted to talk about a little bit about materials, actually. Firstly, about sustainable materials, but also about compliance. So, for example, being as it is in a earthquake region, I guess it's supposed to last quite some time, right? There are certain building codes that necessitate that the building must be around for a while. I mean, what was it like designing, or for the architect to build within those constraints, as well as with the available materials?
So yeah, there are two sides of these requirements. One is the code. So the building has to comply, and it was quite challenging because, as you can see from the top here, the building isn't walls and ceilings and roofs. It's just one general structure. So when we were going through all the steps with the city and trying to find how we would comply with them, they were always coming back to us saying, how would you interpret that? Because it doesn't fit within our models. So that was a fun part of the project itself. Here you can see the main structure is a steel structure around which on the outside you have a glass, hundreds of pieces of glass that come together and clad it from the outside, and in the inside it's stone, it's marble. The other aspect of the requirement was also durability. The Baha'i community expect these buildings to last a long time. And so to do that in a region which is prone to earthquakes, just like Mexico, there was special attention to making sure that the building would be as durable as possible. As you can see on this model, the main slab, the main floor, is separated from the rest of the terrain of the ground, so it's isolated, and it actually stands on 10 specifically designed isolators that will hold the whole building. So that will make sure that within certain ranges, the building will sustain and be kept safe even through earthquakes. The materials were chosen by the architect and his team to both reflect natural elements, that's where the glass and the stone comes into play, but also reflected a degree of beauty, of inspiration that that would break certain traditional boundaries in terms of religious buildings, perhaps. And they were very careful in making sure that those elements would be as harmonious as possible in a building like this.
Okay, beautiful. You didn't really see from the photos before, but it looks like there's quite a lot of green space around it too. Very cool. Do you find that people, I mean, I know it's a public space. I mean, do you find that there are people from the Santiago community that spend time there, or is it typically more followers of the Baha'i faith, or what exactly, or what is the community like there?
So the majority of the visitors are not Baha'is. They're people who want to come here, and first they're attracted by curiosity, but we found out after the past 4 years that they actually come back because they really find it as a place of peace and of connection with something that transcends the day-to-day. 99% of the visitors are not Baha'is. Most of them don't even know what the Baha'i faith is and learn about it for the first time on this place. But this is not a place where religion is taught. It's a place where people are welcome to pray, to meditate, to find themselves, either within the building or in the gardens outside, and really take advantage of what they find there for them. We never expected the quantity of visitors we actually received. Our initial expectations were much lower, but the first year we had over 1 million visitors, and it just maintained year after year. And here you can see the early days where people would just gather and come up, and we had to find ways to control and limit the crowds actually. This is a view at night. Yeah, sorry.
Wow. So I guess.
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, well, I guess that more or less meets the definition of a public space, right? That although it is a house of worship, you still have people coming there because it's a place they can visit without any cost, and they can find peace in the gardens or in a building. That's really incredible. It's quite an achievement. I wouldn't say that many cathedrals or mosques or temples in many cities also play that role. It's very interesting, especially the visitors. So few of them are actually followers of this faith, but more just people who want to spend time there.
Absolutely. And I think that responds to the principles behind the building, which is to be a welcoming and open space to everyone. And we've tried to really foster that spirit and not just announce it, but train the people who serve there and the volunteers in how you receive the people, how you welcome them, how you make them feel as this is really a place not just for them, but there's actually a sense of ownership, of shared ownership. So yes, it is a private place in the sense that it belongs to the Baha'i community, and we carry the costs for the construction and the maintenance, and this is something we offer to the city and to everyone who wants to come. But it's a public space in the sense that it's visited by anyone and everyone without any sort of limitation, without any fees or any costs. And it's simply a space for spirits to gather.
Mm-hmm. Very, very cool. And I guess kind of in staying in the same vein, Mike, I was actually wondering if you could talk a little bit about projects that you've done that are similar, especially in targeting or at least making space available to women, children, minorities, or with people with disabilities. If maybe you also have experience in that, working in the parks, in recreations, with the experience that you have.
Oh, thanks. Thank you, Caleb. It's so wonderful to be here this morning. Just a couple of quick shout outs. Luis, thank you for your work in Mexico. I've been a big supporter of Habitat here in the United States. They've done amazing things, and you hit upon the ownership of the house and how transformative that can be. And so just wonderful work in Mexico. And Tiago, the Santiago site is just, it's so gorgeous. It seems that merging of nature and technical together with in the hands of Siamak Hariri, the architect, is just inspirational and draws people closer to God when they see the beauty that, as you can tell in looking at that temple, it's inspired by nature. That's where the inspiration came from. And people just see it and they're just drawn to beauty because of the way that we, I think, are formed. So thank you for the invitation, and I'll share some images. I'm a landscape architect, and so I have spent my entire career trying to help people draw closer to nature, and especially as we look at, as you said, Caleb, the increasing urbanization of this world, how do we create slices of nature in the midst of our urban society? And it strikes me that there's sort of two big strategies to do that. Let me just go here, and one thing we can do is we can take people to nature. Right. This is outside of Portland. Actually, it's within the city of Portland. It's one of the biggest parks, forested parks in the city limits in the United States. This is about 5,000 acres forest park. So one thing you can do is you can take people from their urban core and where they live and take them out to nature and give them a good access. And so that's a good approach, and it can also be done beautifully. And I think in these examples, whenever we take people to nature, we want to enhance it by the things that we put in it, not tear it out. But another approach is actually to bring nature into the city itself. And this is a park I worked on with Greenworks and Atelier Dreiseidel of Germany. This is a city block in Portland, so about 1 acre in size. And this is a contaminated site with, we had to actually seal the ground so that no water could actually go into the ground, because there's so much contamination that that water would then go into the nearby river in downtown Portland and pollute it. So this is completely fabricated, completely human-made and designed, but it's inspired by the nature that is all around us. So this is the wetlands of the Willamette Valley here in Oregon. And as you go up to the upper part of the screen, you see trees. So this is what we call a biological transect, from wet to moist to a little bit drier to dry landscape. All of the native landscapes, every plant that's here is something that you would find within 50 miles of this site. So when this was built, it was very controversial. People said, what is it? What kind of park is this? And actually, it's become one of the most famous parks, because even though it's man-made, it's 100% natural and ecological. So the water is actually filtered. That's why we don't get algae and things like that. But it's filtered biologically. We don't use any chemicals at all. And and because the water has no chemicals in it, things live here. So people started throwing fish into the water, and the fish grow. They have habitat. They have everything they need. They can hide underneath this walkway. They can, and when there's fish, what do you get? You get predators of fish, like birds, like great blue herons and osprey. And so in the midst of a park that's built with 12 inches of concrete completely underneath it to seal off the contamination, we find that ecological processes are happening, and people come, and it is one of the most beloved public spaces in Portland. So it started being very controversial, like, this is, what kind of crazy park is this? And now we have examples where actually, if you bring nature into the city, people are happier. This is the lesson of COVID, actually, around the world. One of the things that we found in throughout the cities of the world is that people need access to nature. They need access to fresh air. They can't be cooped up in their apartments their entire lives. And you can actually be outside safely and without spreading the disease. So this has become, I think, a very important way of bringing nature into the city. And we even went into some of our existing parks in the city, and then we even changed that. We said, well, these areas of grass, for example, lawn, how could we bring in nature patches? How could we transform a portion of this park to bring back native habitat? And so in the midst of a city park that typically has trees and lawn, we take out the lawn and we replace with native plants. So another way of helping people get exposed to nature, because when you have these, then you have birds and you have all kinds of, in some cases, we even have deer in our parks now. And it's great for people to sort of see the processes of nature at work. And from I guess, a perspective of the socialization of nature, these little projects, these little mini projects in our existing parks have become so popular. We have to print material of what the plants are and how is it working, and they've been very much supported by local neighbors and residents.
Okay, and Mike, actually, based on your recent book, it seems that your faith also plays an important part in your engagement with your work and with nature. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, and maybe also about how maybe faith-based organizations can work with governments or municipal governments, or if you see any nice or possible intersections on that front.
Yeah, that's great, Caleb. I think that you know, I have felt like I have had my feet in two worlds. Oh, whoops, let me go back. Sorry about that. As a landscape architect, I work in the world of design, and mostly filled with people who want to make the world a better place, right? That's why they got into design, and they sacrifice. They work very hard, and you don't get rich in the design world. Most architects, landscape architects, they just work really hard to make the world better. But when I would talk to them about issues of faith, it was a little bit of, oh, I'm not comfortable talking about that. And on the other side, my faith community, people that, again, really great people trying to make the world a better place. But sometimes when I talk about environmental issues and stewardship and taking care of the planet, it's like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. That's so political. And so I did feel like I had my feet in two different worlds. And that really led to thinking more about what does my faith, and I happen to be a Christian, how does my faith inform me about how I should take care of the planet? And so wrote this book, Gardening Eden, which really explores that intersection between spiritual faith and environmental stewardship. Spoiler alert, I come to the conclusion that the Bible for the Judeo-Christian people is filled with examples and reasons and admonitions and even commandments to take care of this planet that we have. And that's not a widespread message, but I think it's an important message that if you are a person of faith, you really should explore, what does your faith say about how we should live on this planet? And how do we make sure that we are being effective stewards? There's many biblical themes, but this is the key passage in our scriptures that told me, and this goes back to the Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and the Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And that means that this creation, this world that we live in, actually was meant to have people engaged in it, working it, taking care of it, making it better. And so that's definitely motivated me. There's many, I was going to say, there's many this is one of my favorite things, one of my favorite messages. I'll let people, it says God's original plan was to hang out in the garden with some naked vegetarians. And I think that's a great example. But there, you asked about organizations, and these are a few. There's just in North America, quite a few faith-based environmental organizations, and people are really focused on trying to make sure that the things that our Holy Scriptures say are incorporated into people's daily lives.
Okay, very cool. Especially to see the organizations. I know that there's quite a lot based around the world. You don't hear about them quite so much, but I mean, like the ones you've mentioned in North America or with Habitat for Humanity, as where Luis is based. I actually had a question, Luis. I know you have to go relatively soon, but I wanted to know, actually, from your experience, what are good ways to foster the relationship and sustainable relationship between faith-based organizations and municipal governments in promoting land use or support for vulnerable communities, or even sustainable architecture and construction? I guess basically what I'm looking for is to hear from your experience how that has worked out in engaging your local government, and if there is a good role or a strong role that faith-based organizations can play in ensuring that.
Yeah, first to say two things for answering that. I will say that in Habitat, we are a faith-based organization, but we are very clear about we even have a non-proselytizing policy, and that has to be clear. So we are basically moved by the love of God, and when we work in the communities, what we have tried to do is translate that into principles that are common to everybody, like service, respect to others, love in action, because we want to show the love of God, but through action, with a little talking or non-talking at all. We are very respectful when we partner with communities, and what we do is we celebrate with them. Sometimes, and you can imagine that when one family finish their house and they want the blessing, one will bring the Catholic priest or the evangelical pastor or another minister, what we do is we celebrate what we have doing, what we are doing together, and that's it. And I will say that part of our experience in working with governments is basically accountability, which is common to all organizations, whether they're faith-based or not. It's a requirement to be accountable in terms of obviously the use of resources, the deliverance of the promise, what we are committing to do, and the professionality. I think all the organizations and basically we here in Mexico have worked a lot in professionalize our staff even. I mean, coming not only as a faith-based, but also Habitat started as a community-based. So at the beginning, most of the staff in Habitat were like people from the communities, but we learned that we needed to bring technical expertise, financial expertise, other kind of expertise, so we could be accountable and transparent, and especially to fulfill, to deliver what we are promising, what we are saying that we're going to do. I will say those are the key elements that we've learned in order to work with government.
Okay, very cool. And then I actually want to maybe add one more question for Tiago. I know that Mike actually kind of alluded to it, where he was talking with his faith community and looking at becoming more, or focusing more on environmental stewardship and some of the challenges that he was facing with people thinking it's political, or people thinking maybe it's not so much their role. I actually wanted to ask Tiago, would you have any recommendations for faith communities who may be doing development projects or construction projects or anything like that, who may want to start including more environmental stewardship? From your experience, what are things they should consider or think about, or good place to start? And if anyone else wants to jump in as well, we're more than happy to hear.
I think both Mike and Luis have mentioned the key elements and the key principles behind it. The participation, local actors, really engaging with everyone, and not come with a big plan thinking that we have solutions for everyone and that's how we're going to solve the problems. It's actually a very consultative process. It's a very dialogue-based process, where we might have these general ideas or these guiding principles that will help us, but in the end, it is through the participation of each person, of each individual, each family, each community in these processes, whether it's the design of a garden or a park, or a group of houses, or a house of worship, or any other plan, educational or transformational processes within society. Perhaps our focus is on understanding and highlighting how we are one people, how humanity is one body, full of different cells that have different responsibilities throughout the world. But in the end, that connection, that unicity that we have in around the world helps us understand how we need to help, serve, and complement each other. And not just people, but and I think Mike was reflecting it very well in his work and his reflections on scriptures, also in our connection to nature, on our connection to the environment. Our experience around the house of worship has shown how, for example, gathering seeds from existing trees was a very simple but very effective way of educating children on nature, on the respect and relation with nature, on bringing it back. We built the house of worship and the gardens you saw on a former golf course. So it was completely ripped off its natural elements. It was overwatered, and it was this perfect little green that totally removed the natural elements from what it was. And throughout the years, we tried to bring it back little by little through the few elements that were still there, and similar ones in the region from the same area. It helped us not just involve children and youth, but also municipal elements. People from the parks and maintenance from the municipality around came to help us, but also to learn from our experience. And together we discovered new ways of having greenhouses and of saving those plants and then sharing them with the universities and schools and public parks and things like that. So it becomes a very symbiotic and complementary process with one another. But it goes back to really engaging in a very horizontal way with everyone and allowing space for different people and different groups and communities to come and share their ideas and share their vision and together learn from one another. I think learning is probably the key element, having a learning attitude throughout all these processes.
Yeah, very interesting, very cool, and very well said. Does anyone have anything they'd like to contribute to that, or maybe if they want to fill in some other details, or anything else they'd like to add, actually?
I think Tiago hit it. You know, one tangible thing that people can do is, if they are people of faith and they are part of a house of worship, is to just look at your place. Where is it that you meet? What could we do differently? How could we transform this building, this landscape, this area, just locally? Just do something small. I love the idea of collecting native seeds and planting them. Those kinds of things that exhibit sort of personal stewardship, personal investment, can make a ton of difference.
All right, well, hey, thank you everyone for participating. We are right on the hour now. Thank you so much for your interventions, Tiago, Luis, and Mike. I think that it went in a very interesting direction today, I think, and not so much necessarily focusing on faith-based organizations and sustainability, but also looking at how you engage your community as a whole and looking at your materials and local engagement horizontally. And I think that was very, very, very compelling and very, very interesting discussion. And I want to thank you all for taking the time. Yeah, it was great talking with all of you.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank also Tiago and Mike, because I like how you finish your sentence, learning together. And I think that's what we're doing here. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Very nice.
Perfect. Well, hey, thanks again. And for everyone who's listening, this recording will be available sometime next week on the KAICIID YouTube channel and our website. If you haven't had the opportunity, please take time to fill out the survey, which should be somewhere in the chat. And once again, that really helps us deliver more interesting and more engaging content. And we're very happy to hear from all of you. So once again, thank you everyone for taking part. And I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.